Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside.
Well, we've got most of the plasterboard on, and one of the things that we are going to need, and it's quite obvious, is we're going to need a radiator in this room because it is quite a big room, and it'll need heating. So we've got ourselves a radiator there. Now this one we got from Wix's. It's 120 centimeters, so 1.2 meters long, and it's a double radiator, and we've worked out that should be quite big enough for this, for this extension. When we come into the kitchen, we find that we've got a small radiator there, and you can see the pipes that come from the central heating system. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect to those pipes and feed them through into the extension, and run the new radiator off those. So with that in mind, we've taken the cover off. There was a plastic cover over the pipes, and we've connected a hose pipe to our drain at the bottom of the radiator there, and all we've done is put the pipe on, taken it outside, and then loosened undone the little valve tap at the end there, and the water is now drained out of the system. So what we've done is we've drilled two holes. We've drilled one there and we've drilled one there, and we're going to connect to the two pipes and take them through to the other side. They're 22mm holes, those, but it's a 15mm pipe, so there's plenty of room. On this side I've used a 2-inch cutter to widen the hole a bit, so that when we come through we'll be able to solder our elbow joints onto this side without being right up against the wall, so they'll be in the middle of that little space there. The plan then is to run the pipes up the wall behind the plasterboard and then bring them out at the top there. Once they're out at the top, they'll run along the top of the ceiling and then down, and they'll all be boxed off later on, and they'll be connected to the radiator, which will go onto this wall across here. And that's the plan. Okay. System drained down, the next part of the plan is I'm going to take the radiator off, and that's simple, straightforward matter. Just disconnecting both valves, one at either end, and then lift the radiator off the brackets. I'm assuming just a case of unscrewing the retaining nut, and then that will pull out. We'll just undo the other one first. There we go. The idea now, I've taken the radiator off. Once we've disconnected it, just lifted off these brackets. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this T-piece into our pipe. So I'm going to cut the pipe, put the T-piece in, and then from there we'll put an elbow straight on top of that. It'll go straight through there into the next room. So very simple. Now these fittings, these are Yorkshire fittings. What they've got is they've got this ring. Some people call them ring solder fittings, and they've got this ring which is raised on the copper, and inside it's full of a ring of solder, which you can see in there, and when you heat it up, that solder melts, and so we've already got solder all the way around the inside of the joint. Makes it so much easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the pipe. I'm going to put this little T connector in, and then straight on top of that there'll be a small piece of pipe, and it will connect to this elbow, which will then go straight through the wall there, and and then from there we will be able to connect up to the pipework going through to the other side. Okay, and that's all we're going to do. So what I'm going to do then is solder all the pipes together, and then we'll just fit it and connect it in. And the way I want to do it is use a little bit of wire wool and just remove any oxide from the pipe. And you can see how the pipe shines up when you take any of the oxide off. Then each of the fittings I want to do exactly the same. Just clean out any oxide that might be just hanging around the inside. And that will mean that when we come to solder, we won't have any problem with the solder adhering to the copper or fusing to the copper. So clean both ends of that little pipe. Then we will just clean the inside of this elbow joint. And then again this last pipe. Okay, so once that's done, what I'm going to do is add a little bit of flux to each of these bits. Just add a little bit of flux there, then put a little bit on the inside of that elbow on both sides, and the flux will just help the solder to flow when we melt it. A little bit of flux on the end of there, a little bit more, a little bit of flux, a little bit on the end, and just keep repeating that just to make sure that we've got flux on every joint. Okay, so if we solder, so I'm using a torch, little pliers here just to make sure everything stays where I want it. Let's get it going. So I've cut this piece of pipe off and I've took about 15mm out of the pipe, and I've cleaned up the ends with a little bit of wire wool so that they'll solder nicely. This is the pipe that's going to go through the wall, so I'm just cleaning up the ends of that with the wire wool so that they take the solder very, very nicely. It'll remove any oxide from the outside of the pipe. That's that. Then what I'm going to do next, this is the T-piece that's going to go on. It's going to help us join up. I'm just going to clean the inside of that with a little bit of wire wool. I'll just give that a little clean with the wire wool. And then when it's all done, I can now take the flux, and I always just put a little bit of flux on the pipe, then a little bit of flux into each of the connecting parts, into the other side, and that can connect on there, just like that. Okay, let me see if I can get this onto my pipework. It's on, but it just needs to go on a little further, I feel. Just don't think that's on far enough. And then this piece of pipe, final part of the jigsaw, which goes back in and will connect to our radiator when everything's back in place. So I've connected into the existing pipework below this radiator, and we've come through the wall now into what used to be the utility, and you'll see those pipes come straight through the wall and then they go straight up. Now what I'm going to do next is take them up right near the ceiling, and then I'm going to bring them out through the next piece of plasterboard we put on. Then we'll run them along the outside and we'll box them in later down, and then we'll mount the radiator just on the wall, just there where that piece of plasterboard is now. Okay, so these are the two pipes that we've got coming out now that are going to lead to our new radiator. And what I've done is I've brought them up the wall, and I'm going to now bring them out so that they're outside of the plasterboard when the plasterboard goes on. They're going to run along just under the ceiling and then down to the radiator. So in order to do that, I'm going to just extend this up a little, because that was the length of the pipe and I want it a little bit higher than that. So that's going to connect to there, and then there'll be a little elbow that comes out, that turns it out, a little connection there, and then I'm going to put this bit of pipe onto there, so it'll all then be outside of the plasterboard and it'll be heading in that direction. What I intend to do then is blank these off temporarily, so that I can refill the system and just check everything I've done for leaks before we go any further, because this is going to be behind plasterboard, and what I don't want to do is board over and then find I've got a leak and have to take the plasterboard off. So that's the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it in two stages. One is to get us outside the plasterboard and send us in that direction, recharge the system, and then I'm going to do a little bit of plastering in preparation, and then after that, when I'm confident that none of this is leaking and we're all good to go, I'm going to board this up, and then we'll be able to put the pipes in and connect up the radiator. What I'll do next though is I'm going to show you how we do the soldering on this. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. I'm just going to clean these up. You can see the pipe there, there's a little bit of oxide on it. I give that a clean with the wire wool. You see how clean that brings up the end. So do the same with this end. So that's how I'm cleaning up each piece of pipe work. And then with the joints themselves, or with the fittings themselves, I'm just getting a little bit inside there just to break up any oxide, and also to clean up the outer edge so that it all seals nicely when I solder it. So if we just come down here then, these are all cleaned up now. I'm going to get a little bit of flux, and what the flux does is the flux helps the solder to flow, but it also helps break down oxide. So I'm just going to wrap a little bit round there, put a little bit inside of that, a little bit inside of that one, and then a little bit on the ends of each of these. go in there like that. Then a little bit on the end of that, a little bit of flux on the end of that. The same with these. The interesting thing about the flux is once you finish, you must make sure that you clean it off all the excess flux off the pipework, because you've finished soldering. After you leave the pipework alone, it'll continue to remove the oxide, and the oxide is nature's way of protecting the copper. So if you don't remove the flux, what you'll find is when you look under your sink one time in the future, you'll see green growing around the joint itself. So if ever you do find green, it's like a verdigris, I think it's called. If you ever find green marks on your copper pipework, it's because somebody's left flux on there. All you have to do is wipe it off and then give it a little wash, and the green will go away and it won't come back. So we've got our pipework to go up, pipe coming out, small piece going in, and then it's turning our pipework off to the right, and that's how we want it to be, so that our pipework will come out of the wall and then run along outside the plasterboard. So let's just work out the best way of setting this up on there, and I think that'll do us nicely, just like that. Okay, ready to go. Okay, so as I said earlier, I'm going to put a little bit of extra solder on the outside of these. It just gives me a little bit of peace of mind that that we've covered the outside properly. The solder I'm using has got a core, a flux core, so it already has flux in it. But I always put a little bit on the outside as well, or I think it's a good idea to put a little bit on the outside as well. Let's see how we get on with this then. You can see the solder coming through. If you come right close now, you can see the solder there, actually coming through from the ring inside. So all I do is add a little bit to it, give it a little bit more. And there we go. And that's that all soldered up. And if we just leave that to cool now, we'll be able to fit that to our pipework. So I've got the pipes assembled here. I've got the next fitting that's going to connect it on. I've put a little bit of flux in there, a little bit of flux on the pipe. And what I've done is I've put this is a small heat-proof blanket which stops any flame from going through to anything else. The reason I've done that is I've got a piece of wood this side, but I've also got the metal on that side that's got the cables under it. So I want to protect both of those. So I'll be pointing the flame away from both of them. Now I just slide that on, get this to the angle that I wanted. So the pipe's going to run along there, just parallel with the ceiling and outside of our plasterboard. Okay, so I'll just get the torch now and solder that on. So the second pipe's been put on as well now, and we've boarded and plastered that area. Both pipes have got caps on the end so no water can come out, and we've refilled the system. In the next episode we're going to show you how we fit the radiator and connect it to those two pipes that have now tapped in to the main radiator circuit. See you all next time.